James Cameron's film encapsulated a beautiful world with exotic creatures, and it would be any person's dream to simply pack a bag and leave for a solo trip to the exotic world of Pandora. Cameron conceived the idea for Avatar back in 1994 as an 80-page story, which was to be transformed into a film in 1999, but he needed around $400 million for his ambitious project, and no production house wanted to greenlight such an expensive film. But then, Cameron also felt that the digital effects technology of 1999 had several constraints. Naturally, the production was halted, and it was only in 2009 that the film and Cameron's magnificent creatures breathed life. And that's how a cinematic revolution came into being, a film that was a visual spectacle, with a setting that was effectively convincing. And if you think about it, every single species that appears in Avatar resulted from long designing processes. I mean, there were a few scenes that took more than 47 hours to render, despite powerful computers. From the plants and environment of Pandora to the Nawi tribe and creatures, everything was deeply thought upon. This made the creatures and monsters look not only organic, but also practical and rational from a physics standpoint. So keep your nerd glasses handy. Nerd! Because in this video, we will deep dive into the 6 breathtakingly beautiful monstrosities from James Cameron's Avatar. But before we begin, please consider subscribing to us. It's a small click from you, but it goes a long way for us. Let's begin, shall we? Number 1. Hammerhead Titanotheres, the terrestrial hammerhead shark. The protagonist, Jake, came across a herd of hammerhead titanotheres on his first mission on Pandora. Artist Yuri Bartoli sketched the earliest concept art for the hammerheads, which were massive beasts with a heavily armored body, but their most distinctive characteristic was their fan-like crest and a strong bone protruding from the skull, which was used for both offense and defense. However, these crests could also be used for display to a female and mating. Clearly, the creature was influenced by and named after the hammerhead sharks. These massive beasts were so strong that even other Pandoran monsters like Thanatores hesitated before attacking a hammerhead. During the production stage, the hammer-like protrusions and the crest were supposed to be made of a bright hammer or horn, but later, the idea was dropped, and a more delicately designed structure was put to use. As for their nature, the hammerheads are rather docile creatures, unless they are threatened or made angry. For instance, Grace asks Jake not to shoot the animal because it would piss off the herbivorous monstrosity.
Don't shoot! Don't shoot, you'll piss him off!
When under a greater threat or a predator, the hammerheads group up and charge at the enemy, stomping and desecrating everything that comes in their way. This is exactly what happened in the end when the hammerheads charged at the armed men in AMP suits. For perspective, imagine a group of 20 rhinos charging towards you. However, these would be twice their regular size and with 6 legs.
Run! It's a stampede! Don't look back!
Number 2. Thanatore, the truck-sized black hellhound. Presumably the most vicious, yet elegant terrestrial predator of the universe, a Thanatore could devour a T-Rex and hunt a xenomorph for dessert.
That's so crazy.
This beast was nothing short of a gigantic hellhound with 6 limbs and an armored neck and head, which housed ostensible jaws. These predators resemble the extinct earthly predators called Inostrancevia, which were characterized by long, saber-tooth-like canines. Likewise, the Thanatore possesses sharp teeth that could measure up to 1 foot.
What?
Its lean and muscular body provides it the required agility to run and leap through the dense jungles of Pandora. However, the Thanatore's tail is also a potent weapon. Despite their extremely violent nature, Neytiri was able to bond with the Thanatore, but only when this granddaddy of Black Panthers offered her the chance. Early concept art by artists like Scott Patton, etc., shows a very different outlook of the Thanatore from what we saw in the film. However, among the Pandoran creatures, the Thanatore went through the longest phase of designing. In the end, the final creature looked magnificent with additional features like a head crest similar to that of a xenomorph queen. This gave the Thanatore a royal outlook, kinda like a jungle king. Number 3, Viper Wolf, the feline velociraptor. The Viper wolves flanked Jake from all sides, and he would have been dead had it not been for Thanatore. Viper wolves are pack hunters, much like the velociraptors. The creatures had reflective green eyes, and their black-on-black designs made it seem that they ran just as a liquid flows, swiftly and elegantly. They had hideously diabolic laughter, much like the hyenas from the human world. Furthermore, they could climb like apes and run like dogs. Interestingly enough, the Viper wolves were inspired by Francis Bacon and minks. Bringing the Viper wolf to life was particularly tricky, however. Jason Matthews sculpted the clay maquette that served as a reference for the digital model. In the end, the final design wasn't just realistic, but outstandingly organic. Number 4, Dire Horse. We've heard about dire wolves from Game of Thrones, right? Well, James Cameron's Avatar bestowed us with dire horses, magnificent six-legged beasts with armored hides, and resembling the Clydesdales from Earth. Just like the Dothraki depended on steeds, the Nawi used dire horses as the common mode of transport and defense. Although the dire horse translates to regular horses, their heads resemble anteaters. However, dire horses don't survive on ants, but much like a few insects, they live on the nectar of plants and flowers. According to Wayne Barlow, the dire horse was more than giant horse-like elephant-sized creatures. They were far more developed and graceful, with erect manes like that of zebras and Przewalski's horses. Christopher Swift created the maquettes and painted the same, which were then photographed and digitally transformed to obtain the final design. Number 5, Banshee, Ikran in the Nawi language. The Banshees were the primary mode of transport of the Nawis, and that's why great thought had to be put into the creature. Nothing could go wrong. In the end, it was an elegant creature that took us by storm. Interestingly, James Cameron intentionally kept a lower gravity on Pandora, so that the existence of huge flying animals such as the Banshee would be justified realistically. Being the film's most prominently featured Pandoran species, the Banshees were larger than Nawi and had a wingspan of around 10 meters. But bringing them to life was more demanding than you and I can imagine, solely because it was a flying animal. Naturally, one had to design it while flying, perching, and all other things that birds do. For the creators, it was something like designing an aircraft, and a lot of reverse engineering had to be applied. Once the mechanics and technical aspects were perfected, they started working upon the aesthetics and beauty of the animal. Take a look at Cameron and Neville Page's notes on the creature's design. If you look closely, you'll notice that the Banshee's structural configuration and silhouette are inspired by deep-sea creatures like great whites and manta rays, but also by sports cars. That's precisely why the Banshee has a streamlined body for better aerodynamics as well as barracuda teeth. However, its head resembles that of a reptile's, but fishes inspired the numerous teeth on the Banshee's jaws. This amalgamation of a reptilian skull and fish jaws gives the Banshee the desirable unique and alien look. Once the design was completed and the pigmentation was finalized, Stan Winston Studio made a life-size model of the Banshee so that Weta Digital could digitally bring the creature to life. The Great Leonopteryx, or Toruk. We noted how a Banshee's wingspan could be more than 10 meters, but they don't come any close to the Leonopteryx, who are Pandoran creatures several times larger than the Banshees. The Great Leonopteryx had a midnight blue-crested head, and came with black, yellow, and scarlet stripes. Neville Page created the initial art of this magnificent beast, which is clearly the apex flying predator on Pandora. Its wings were inspired by monarch butterfly wings, while its beak was inspired by parrots. In the movie, the great Leonopteryx was central to the Nawi culture. It was both revered and celebrated. According to a prophecy, the rider of this beast, or Toruk Makto, would be the protector of the Nawi tribes. Naturally, much like the Banshee, the Leonopteryx could be bonded with, and Jake became a Toruk Makto by overpowering it from above. Being the largest flying predator, the Leonopteryx never looked up for predators, and Jake used this as a weakness. In the end, the Leonopteryx proved to be most potent and helpful in the war against the company. Do we get to see these creatures again? Well, as you may very well know, James Cameron's Avatar 2 is set for release later this year. The premise of the film would take Jake and Neytiri's adventures to other parts of Pandora because of an ancient Pandoran threat. As far as the cast is concerned, Sigourney Weaver and Stephen Lang are set to appear in the sequel, and it shouldn't be a surprise because of Avatar's deep science fiction lore. However, new veteran actors like Kate Winslet, Cliff Curtis, and Vin Diesel will also feature in important roles in Avatar 2. Although principal photography ended in late 2020, the grand effects and rendering of the underwater motion capture have delayed the release of Cameron's potentially epic sequel. That was all in this video. Let us know if you want us to explore anything else. We'd be happy to oblige. Take care and have a good one.